For 30 years, he had been a faithful railroad employee, never missing a day of work. And up until the last day of his job, he had no marks against him. He was an excellent employee. And most people loved him. All but one. For 30 years, he went up and down the aisles of the train collecting tickets. And every stop, you'd hear him say, "All aboard!" And for 30 years, he did this job. The last day of his employment, it was time for retirement. It was that gold watch day. The last day, he had taken one individual and threw him out of the train to his death. Well, nobody could understand why he would do such a thing. And during his trial, he told the jury and the judge and everyone there that for 30 years this individual came on the train. Every day he thought of another way to bring pain and grief to him, calling him names. He was just a bitter individual. And then when he explained to the jury and the judge that he had planned for 30 years to kill him on his last day on the job, well, the jury and the judge had no choice but say that was certainly premeditated murder, and the laws of that state at the time said that he would be executed by electric chair. So they waited and waited for the day of his execution. No stay from the governor. No appeals. The day of his execution, they went to his cell, they opened the cell, and they took the long walk to the electric chair. In that long hall, they had a guard on the right and a guard on the left. They had a guard in the front and a guard behind him. They had a priest on the side going, and they had everything together, just the way it was supposed to be. The process was all in order. They set him on the electric chair. They put the straps on his arms. They put the straps on the legs. But he put the belt around his neck. They put the cup over his head. And when it came time, they hit the switch. The lights dimmed in the prison. And when they turned it off, he sat in the chair, just smiling. They had never had that happen before. So they took the straps off his arms, the straps off his leg, the cap off his head, the belt around his neck. They walked him back down to his cell with a guard on his right and a guard on the left, and the guard in the front and the guard behind. They put him in the cell. And then they did the research. Electricians came from all over, tested the chair again. And they said, well, maybe for some reason there was not enough power, so they put more power to the chair, and they tried the second attempt to execute him. The day of the execution, they went to his cell, opened the cell door, long walk down the hall to the execution area and to the electric chair. He had a guard on his right, a guard on his left. He had a a guard in the front and a guard behind, a priest on the side going, and they walked down that long hall. They set him in the electric chair. They put the straps on his arm. They put the straps on his leg. Put the belt around him. They put the cap on his head. And then when they were ready, they hit the switch. The lights dimmed of the whole prison, and even dimmed in the city, because they put extra power to it. They turned the switch off, and there he was, just smiling away. They couldn't believe it. So they took the straps off his arms, put the straps on his leg, took the belt around his neck, and they took the cap off his head. They walked him down the long aisle back to his cell. They had a guard on the right, the guard on the left, the guard in the front, guard behind, and they put him in the cell, and they locked the door. And then they looked at the laws and said that we can only attempt to execute according to the current laws of the state 3 times. They could never thought that this would ever happen. They called expert electricians from all over the state and beyond. They did tests. They had conferences. And they still could not figure out what was the problem. They made some corrections and they said, well, we're going to add more power. And they added more power. And to that third and final attempt to execute them, they went to a cell and they opened the cell. They had a guard on the right and the guard on the left, the guard in the front, the guard behind, the priest on the side going, and they let him down to the execution room. Put him in the chair. They put straps on his arms, straps on his leg. They put the belt around him. They put the cap on his head. And they, with one final attempt, the last attempt they could do, they hit the switch. The lights dimmed. Smoke flew. Sparks were flying. From miles and miles away, the lights were dimming. They left the electricity on an extra amount of time, and then they undid the switch. The smoke cleared. And there he was, just smiling away. They took the straps off his arm. They put the straps off. They took the belt around his neck, and they took the cap off his head. They let him down back to his prison cell with it. Guard on the right and guard on the left, and guard behind him, guard in front of him. And they led him to the prison cell, did all the paperwork, did all the research, and said, well, our hands are tied. We know he had premeditated murder. We know what he did, but according to some obscure law, after 3 attempts, we have to release him. So they released him. The day of his release, they led him down the long hall for exiting the prison. They had a guard on the right, the guard on the left, the guard on the front, guard behind. And they opened the door and they released him, and the press was all there. People taking pictures, people asking questions. They had electricians from all over the world, curious what had happened. They all checked out the chair. They all checked out the electricity. They all checked everything out. And the number one question that all the electricians and the reporters ask is, why couldn't they kill you? Why couldn't they electrocute you in the electric chair? Why? The gentleman looked at the cameras and looked at the reporters, looked at the famous electricians of all over the world, and he said, you know, I worked for that railroad for 30 years. And to be honest with you, I never was a good conductor. joining me.